first conversation. We have two very important conversations today, and we'll start with China. Last Friday, China expanded its zero-tariff treatment to cover all 53 African countries, with which it has diplomatic ties, creating new opportunities for Africa to boost exports and industrialization amidst the global headwinds of protectionism. In the early hours of Friday, 1st of May, that's last Friday, 24 tons of apple from South Africa cleared the customs. And cleared customs in South China's Shenzhen, becoming the first batch of African goods to benefit from the expanded zero-tariff policy. China had already scrapped tariffs on 100% of tariff lines for at least 33 goods and 33 least developed countries. That's what we've seen from them. That's since December 1st, 2024. The new zero-tariff policy will benefit the relatively better off countries such as Kenya, Egypt, and Nigeria. Under the new arrangement, zero tariffs will apply to 20 African non-LDCs in the form of preferential tariffs rate for 2 years, during which China will continue to promote the signing of the China-Africa Economic Partnership for Shared Development Agreement with relevant African countries. Officials said the agreement will fix zero tariffs as a long-term institutional arrangement. China's Commerce Ministry said in a statement that the zero-tariff policy will lend a competitive edge to African products such as cocoa from Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, coffee and avocados from Kenya, citrus fruit, wine from South Africa, which used to face tariffs ranging from 8% to 30%. This looks good, sounds good. Let's talk to a reporter from China Global Television Network, that's CGTN, Marquez. She joins live for this conversation. Thank you so much. It's good to have you join us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. Well, I see very well that China is set to implement its historic zero tariffs for all African countries with diplomatic ties. Can you make us understand more of what this practically means?
Yes, as yourself has very correctly pointed out, that starting from May 1st, which is Friday, when a product arrives from an African country that has diplomatic ties with China, arrive at a Chinese port, which Shenzhen is one of them, as you just mentioned, the importer no longer needs to pay any tariff. And China has basically opened up its entire market to all of Africa tariff-free. Well, there is a two-step timeline here. Since December 2024, China had already given zero tariff on 100% of the products to the 33 least developed countries in Africa, according to the United Nations standard. What's new and historic now is that China has extended that preferential tariff policy to the remaining 20 African nations that are not classified as least developed. That includes bigger economies like Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and South Africa. One important detail, as you have also pointed out, is that the new 20 countries added to that policy enjoys a zero tariff treatment is currently under a 2-year experimental trial running until maybe early 2028. And China has said it will negotiate a long-term agreement during this time. To give you a practical example, some of Nigeria's main agricultural exports to China are sesame seeds, cashew nuts, and cocoa. So before this policy, they faced tariffs that could be 15 to 20%. But now for the next 2 years, they face zero tariff. That means lower cost for Chinese consumers and a real price advantage for Nigerian farmers.
That sounds like more of good news. Well, let's put it that way. But let me ask you, some say this is likely to create new opportunities for Africa to boost exports and industrialization amidst the global headwinds of protectionism. I like your thoughts around this.
I think that's a very fair observation, especially when you look at the bigger picture. Right now, many developed economies, as we know, are raising tariffs and moving sort of towards protectionism and raising the barriers. But China is going the opposite direction. So, yes, this creates a very real opportunity. But here's the bigger point: the zero tariff alone won't be industrializing Africa. What it does is to send a signal to Chinese investors at home, which is if you build a processing facility in Africa, so to speak, for example, a cashew processing plant or a cocoa grinding factory, then the finished products can go to China tax free. Well, this is the real path to industrialization because this will encourage local producers to have their own factories so that they can move up the value chain. We've already seen some of these movements in the early months after the initial policy was announced in 2024. Chinese firms invested nearly $2 billion under this cooperation model. So my view is the policy opens a window, but turning that into factories and jobs will require more than tariffs. It will require investment on the ground.
Mm. Well, do you think again that this will help increase investment in Africa? And that's also something very important, bringing capital, technology, equipment, and management expertise to process Africa's specialty products locally.
Mm. I think that is very much the goal of this policy, actually, which is not to just increase trade volume, but with more investment.
Hmm.
Chinese commerce officials have actually stated this openly that they want this zero tariff policy to encourage Chinese companies to set up factories in Africa to process local products closer to the source, so to speak, and instead of just shipping raw materials to the country. So right now, a lot of Nigerian cocoa is exported as beans. But if Chinese companies can build sort of for example, grinding factory in Lagos, it can turn those beans into cocoa butter or powder and then export the finished products to China tariff-free. This brings in the capital, machinery, and management know-how, and also create jobs, of course. That said, investment decisions depends on more than just tariffs. If Chinese companies can have more support on the ground, so to speak, on investment climate or interpretation of business regulations, then we're likely to see more of this capital and technological transfer into
Transfer of knowledge, equipment and all of that, helping us industrialize is something that is key at this very critical time for us in Nigeria. But let me again ask you that this zero tariffs, one way or the other, will facilitate entry of African products into China. Now, meeting Chinese consumers' surging demands for high quality goods. But something comes to my mind. Are you worried, or what's your concern with regards to standards? Because we've been talking about that also for some time. Yes, our imports are getting better. We see we are doing well with non-oil exports when you look at the figures. But the issue of standards remains something that everyone should be concerned about.
I think this is an area where both sides are putting a lot of effort into getting it right. Chinese regulators have recently made it clear that zero tariff is just one part of the policy package. So, in order to solve that problem that you have just mentioned, there is also a strong focus on what they call eliminating barriers in standards, which includes aligning African products with China's domestic standards. So what that means in practice is that China has already set up what we call green channels to speed up customs clearance, for example, for African products. But more importantly, it's also providing technical assistance on the ground. For example, on the agricultural front, Chinese regulators have been running projects in Zambia, Mozambique, and Tanzania. They have published over 300 standards and training manuals covering everything from planting to irrigation to processing, packaging, and transportation. And South Africa, for one, has also signed several sanitary protocols with China and is planning to add more products like cherries and blueberries this year. So the goal is to build what we call soft connectivity, which basically means aligning the rules and standards between China and African countries so that products can flow seamlessly. And the standard is in no way saying that whose product is better or not. It's just a way of fast tracking the trade and product exchanges between China and the continent.
Also thinking, just on a lighter note of capacity issues for countries like Nigeria, my country, where we still have to talk about industrialization. I'm thinking of how we can make the best of the opportunities with regards to these zero tariffs. Do you think we will tap and get the best of it?
I think definitely you will because, as I mentioned, and also coincidentally, I was doing some research and I heard the speech of the African Union Development Agency's head, Madam Nardos Bekele Thomas, and she actually mentioned that. Yes, the zero tariff policy is good, but already African countries have been enjoying existing preferential tariff policies already, like before this policy. So why is this time different? What, as you mentioned, what more can African countries, including Nigeria, benefit from it? And I think Madam Bekele Thomas was very direct in pointing out that if Africa continues to just send raw material to China while importing machinery and electronics, then the zero tariff will simply increase the volume of trade without changing its structure. In her words, Africa will be moving larger volumes through an old structure of dependency. So I think to answer your question, how would countries, including Nigeria, benefit more from it, is a very fair and important concern. Um, I think the side of the story is that Chinese trade authorities have said repeatedly that the goal of this policy is not just to boost raw material trade, is to use market access as an incentive for investment in processing, agro industry, and light manufacturing, etc. So the tariff is the hook, but the real work is the investment and behind it. And as Madame Bekele Thomas herself has acknowledged, that China has opened the door, and her concern is whether Africa is ready to walk through it, not as 53 separate countries sort of competing with each other, but as a coordinated economy entity to build regional production systems. So I agree actually with her messages, which also answer your question. That is, the structural change is more important, but it doesn't happen really automatically or overnight. It requires an overall strategy, and China is going to support that strategy with not just fast track or green channels of importing these products, but with technical assistance, investment, and management know-how, and a focus on added value, not just volume.
Now, some analysts say tariffs are rarely the main obstacle for African exporters, pointing into deeper structural issues, just like one I mentioned now. Are you also concerned about this militating exports and imports across the board?
I don't think I'm very concerned. As I mentioned just now, I think this will be um, the historic meaning of this policy this time is that it's not just boosting the volume of the trade, it's an opportunity for big economies on to increase the quality of their products and also to enjoy a bigger policy preference. So I think I'm not very concerned about it. And as I mentioned, this is in line with what we heard from the African Union's overall policy in general. So I think this is very much in line.
All right, finally, what will be your message? Well, to benefiting countries, of course, African countries, and China moving forward.
I think if I were to sum it up, the message would be the door is open, but the real work starts now. First of all, it's worth recognizing why this policy is seen as historic. It's not just about the volume, which is already hitting up to $350 billion last year. It's also about the timing. As we all know, We're currently in a global environment where economies are trying to protect themselves with tariff barriers. So for China and African countries to do the opposite, or at least try to do the opposite, it suggests that emerging markets are increasingly taking on kind of a responsibility to keep trade open and balanced. And I think that in itself is a very important and positive signal. Thank you.
Makay Amos, thank you so much. A reporter from CGTN. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Nigeria. We really do appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right then. Well, there's a lot with regards to this move by China. We'll stay with this story. It's a developing one, and see how prepared our manufacturers and, of course, other players around the export value chain are ready to tap into